also have a question for Kwan about this kind of separation you're talking between the Vietnamese state and China after the Sino-Japanese War. I'm wondering why you chose kind of that moment, and especially when you're talking about figures like, or especially when we're looking at kind of the actions of people like Hu Duc, and after the Franco-Spanish kind of incursion in Cochin China, how there was no kind of appeal to the Qing dynasty, how they were taking advantage of kind of the fall of the Qing during the Taiping Revolution and to assert authority, to assert independence. How do you kind of, what's the difference between that moment in like the earlier part of the 19th century and the Russo-Japanese War that you identify as kind of this break between tradition?
Sorry, you mentioned the Sino-Japanese War kind of took me off.
Yeah, you mentioned the Sino-Japanese War as kind of this moment when there was a separation right between in this philosophical moment in Vietnam before this move away from the Chinese dominance and into Japanese modes of information transfer, and I'm wondering why that moment precisely when there's kind of this earlier history of this move away from China.
I chose the 1905 as a really particular moment because I think the abolishment of the Chinese imperial examination, which Vietnam still continued up until 1919, was a really big moment. And also around this time, a little bit earlier, Fan Hoi Zhao was getting really active in his writing in 1904, and around this time, Chinese literature from Kang Youwei and Liang Shichao began appearing within Vietnam a lot more. And this seems to happen more around some period leading up to 1905 with the formation of the Tonkin Free School. And so kind of because of that reason, I chose 1905 because it appears to be this moment where a lot of the Chinese reform literature that is being written by Liang Shichao in his exile between, mostly some of the stuff between 1898 and 1902 is entering into Vietnamese conversations.
Please, more? Yes.
Thank you so much. I came late, so I think I missed the first two presentations. But from the last two presentations, from the context of Madura and Pune, Sulawesi, it made me think of that there is a thread between those two presentations in which authoritarian is one of the enemy. But then it also makes me think that how would those intellectuals deal with local authorities or sultanate or other forms of local political authorities? Because I think that in Indonesia, authoritarianism is maintained by local feudalism, and I want to be able to see the roles of those local intellectuals, how they deal with the local politicians or any other forms of authorities in their region. That's, I think, for those two last presentations. And I'm also interested to hear more about Mudar Tamim. I don't know, I'm also interested in how the Puirem has been contributive toward our Indonesian cultural and political atmosphere. And it's just, I don't know, if he were still alive in this today's situation, what would he respond to nowadays regime? Does he, because you were mentioning about the hidden resistance from Mudar Tamim, how effective hidden resistance during Suharto authoritarianism and how effective in today's authoritarianism, in which Prabowo or the son-in-law of Suharto happened to be Indonesian president today. Because I heard lately, if you already heard Zen RS, well-known historian from Indonesia who published Tan Malaka's book. He mentioned that Indonesian authoritarianism is kind of permanent situation compared to reformasi, which happened to be only few years of event. So that was it. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, you can use that. Yeah. Stand up like this. Okay. Thank you for the question. Maybe the question is very complicated, right? But I would like to say that Islam spread in Indonesia drove the Tariqah. Tariqah is the spiritual movement. So in the first beginning, Bone was Hinduism or Buddhism, maybe. It's not Islam. From the first king until the 10th king is Buddhism. Buddhism. And the 11 king was Islam. So after the 11 to 31, maybe 31 king is Muslim, and to be sultanate, from the kingdom to be sultanate. So the spiritual movement is from the crowd, from grassroots, not from the royal, from the kingdom. And because they have power from the grassroots, so maybe make easy to sultanate. I don't know exactly about this discussion, because maybe we need to discuss more about the Sultan Bone and what mean how the Sultan from the Buddhism to be Islam, because my focus only to multi-text manuscript, and there's multi-text manuscript right in late 80th century. So I didn't find any evidence to prove your question, maybe. So how about the authoritarian, right? In this era, my focus in investigation is about the core of the teaching from the Sultanate, core of the teaching of Syekh Yusuf al-Makassari Tariqah, and how Yusuf al-Makassari Tariqah shape and integrate between Sharia and between Sharia, I mean Islamic law and religious movement. So there is no clash between religious movement and Islamic law. And then there is no clash between society and the government. Maybe that's my answer.
Thank you. Please, the next speaker would like to respond to the other part of the question. Authoritarianism.
Okay, thank you very much. Probably I didn't catch up all the questions, but probably you asked 2 or 3 questions. But for this moment, I would like to answer the first question, and the second and the third question. Please me clarify the third or the second question. Probably the first question you asked is the role of local intellectual in Indonesia, particularly in Madura. What was their role to the Indonesian political system, right? And our figure that we wrote about Modar Tamim, he is from Maduris, and of course he was engagedly participating how to develop and improve the political system in Indonesia. One thing that we should know about him, he was not only a mufassir, he is not only a man who mastered the Quran, but at the same time, he was also Indonesian legislator. I would say in Indonesia we call DPR, for example. So he is a mufassir, he is an interpreter of the Quran. At the same time, He is also Indonesian legislator as well. So one of the unique things from this figure from Model Taman, I think, is he contributed to develop and improve the political system in Indonesia, particularly in Madura, for example. He contributing by interpreting the Quran, not only write the books, for example. He wants to contribute his ideas to improve, to fix, you said, to fix the authoritarianism in Indonesia by interpreting the Quran. One of the unique interpretation of Modar Tamim, I think, when he interpret the Quran, chapter 2, verse number 30. Probably one of you or some of you open the Google and you click on the Google, the Quran, chapter 2, verse number 30. There is a word Khalifah. إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. What the Khalifa? The unique thing from his interpretation when the word Khalifa, and he said, when he interpret this word of Khalifa, he said, Khalifa is not a king, he said. Khalifa is not untouchable leader. It is brilliant interpretation, I think. So the Quran says, based on his interpretation, God makes and creates all of us, all human beings, not to destroy the world, not to destroy the earth, but to be Khalifa. Khalifa means, what is the meaning of Khalifa? The protector, I would say, stewardship, right? So I think this is a unique interpretation of Modern Tarim. Mudhar Tamim, right? He wants to contribute his ideas by interpreting the Quran, and why this interpretation is important, particularly in Madura, particularly in Madura, because most of people in Madura are Muslim, right? And I think one of the books that Madura people always read is the Quran and the interpretation. So to talk with Madura's people, we have to give them the Quran and the translation of the Quran and also the interpretation of the Quran. And one thing that we should know that this figure, Modar Tabim, interpret the Quran in a local language, so that these Madras people can understand the Quran perfectly and fully. Yeah, probably this is something that I can clarify. And regarding your second or third question, at this moment I didn't catch up. If you